In the summer of 1942, behind the British line in Egypt, a workshop fitter looked at a captured German 88 and made a decision no manual could defend. He did not have a blueprint. He did not have factory brackets. He did not even have a vehicle meant to carry that kind of weight. What he had was a battered Mack lorry, scrap steel, sandbags, a welding torch, and a gun that had been killing British tanks from ranges their own crews could barely answer. So he put the gun on the truck, not politely, not cleanly. He cut away the bed, braced the frame, packed the chassis low with ballast, and turned a weapon built to sit still into a weapon that could disappear. The first shot should have broken it. The lorry jumped. Dust burst from the wheels. Every man in the repair park waited for the frame to twist apart. It held. And in that moment, something changed in the Desert War. Because the lesson was not that a truck could make an 88 better. It could not. The lesson was worse. A perfect gun that had to stay still could be found. An ugly gun that moved fast enough could become a rumor. By 1942, every serious soldier in North Africa understood what the German 88 could do. Officially, it was an anti-aircraft gun. In practice, it had become one of the most terrifying tank killers in the desert. Its long barrel threw an armor-piercing shell fast enough to smash through British armor at distances that made smaller anti-tank guns feel almost personal by comparison. At Halfaya, at Sidi Rezek, and along the routes west of Tobruk, British tank crews learned to fear the moment when the desert ahead looked empty. Because empty ground often meant the gun was already waiting. German crews used the 88 with patience. They dug it in, they masked it with scrub, netting, stone, and shadow. That let the British armor come forward. Then, when the range was right, one flash from a low position could turn a tank into a furnace before the crew even understood where the shot had come from. That was the orthodox way to use a heavy gun. Stable ground, prepared emplacement, measured range, calm firing drill, and on paper that way was obviously superior. The carriage was designed for the recoil. The outriggers spread the shock. The sight picture stayed steady. A trained crew could keep firing from a position that had been prepared properly. A lorry bed offered none of that. It flexed. It rocked. Its springs fought the gun. Its center of gravity was too high. Its tires hated soft sand. A staff officer looking at the first improvised gun trucks did not need much imagination to condemn them. They looked dangerous because they were dangerous. They looked temporary because they were temporary. They looked like the kind of invention that kills its own crew before it ever troubles the enemy. And if the Western Desert had been a normal battlefield, the critics would have been right. But the Western Desert was not normal. It was a war fought across distances that made maps feel dishonest. There were no hedgerows to anchor a flank, no villages every mile, no stone walls to hide behind. A unit could feel secure at dawn and find its side open by noon. A gun position that looked perfect in the morning could become a trap by afternoon. In that country, stillness was not strength. Stillness was an address, and once the enemy had your address, he could send artillery, tanks, aircraft, or simply go around you. The men in the repair parks understood this before the paperwork did. They were not trying to build a proper self-propelled gun. They were trying to solve a desert problem with desert materials. A captured 88 without its trailer, a lorry that still ran, steel plate cut from wrecks, railway sleepers, old engine blocks, ammunition boxes packed as dead weight. Anything heavy enough to keep the rear of the truck from kicking like a mule when the gun fired. The fitters reinforced the chassis rails until they looked like scars. They spread steel across the frame so recoil would not crush one point. They cut firing arcs out of the bodywork. They stripped away anything that added height without strength. Then they built a crude rear brace that could be dropped in seconds. Not to make the truck stable in the engineering sense. Only stable enough. That phrase mattered. Stable enough to fire. Stable enough to survive 2 rounds. Stable enough to move before the enemy found the answer. Because nobody sensible expected these trucks to stand in place and duel a proper battery. That was not their purpose. The truck was not a fortress. It was a door. It opened for a moment, let the gun speak, and slammed shut somewhere else. A crew would roll up behind a low rise, nose pointed toward escape, engine still coughing hot. The gun layer would catch a silhouette through heat shimmer. The loader would shove in the round. The brace would drop. The driver would keep one hand ready on the gear lever because the firing position was already becoming old news. 1 shot. A correction shouted through dust. A second shot. Maybe a third, if the target was worth the gamble. Then the brace came up, the driver turned, and the whole machine lurched away before the return fire had a fixed point to punish. That was the secret. Not accuracy, timing, not elegance, tempo, not a better 88. A harder-to-kill 88. The strangest advantage came from the very thing that made officers distrust it. The gun sat high, too high for comfort, too high for proper balance. But in broken desert ground, that height let the crew see over folds, brush, and wreckage that could hide a lower gun. A towed emplacement could be steadier and still blind. The truck was ugly, but it could look. And in the desert, seeing first often mattered more than looking correct. The real test came during the months when the British line seemed to fold and remake itself over and over again. Gazala, Tobruk, the long retreat toward Mersa Matruh, then the hard stop at El Alamein. These were not tidy battles with clean front lines. They were collisions, withdrawals, box defenses, patrols, columns moving through dust, and commanders trying to understand where the enemy had gone after the map stopped making sense. This was exactly the kind of war that punished towed heavy guns. To use one properly, you needed time. Time to halt, time to unlimber, time to dig in, time to camouflage, time to range. During a retreat, time was the one supply no quartermaster could deliver. If a towing vehicle was hit, the gun was lost. If the position was turned, the crew had to run or die. If the column moved before the gun could be recovered, the weapon became a monument for the enemy to collect. The improvised gun truck did not solve every danger. It could bog. It could break an axle. It could shake its mount loose. It could be destroyed by any tank or aircraft that caught it exposed. But it solved one problem no perfect static gun could solve. It could leave under its own power. And sometimes that was the difference between a weapon and a wreck. There were moments in the retreat when British rear guards had to slow German armor without pretending they could stop it. Armored cars watched the approaches. Light tanks screened the road. Soft-skinned lorries dragged supplies east. Behind them, a pair of heavy gun trucks could slide onto a ridgeline, fire at silhouettes beyond 2,000 yards, and vanish into the dust behind the next fold of ground. To the men being shot at, the effect was maddening. A heavy round arrived from ground that had looked empty. A flash showed for a second, then nothing. By the time a panzer crew slewed its turret, the gun had shifted. By the time artillery observers searched the ridge, the truck was behind another one. What should have been a single clumsy weapon began to feel like several guns. That psychological effect mattered. German anti-tank doctrine depended on certainty. Find the lane, prepare the kill zone, let the enemy commit. Destroy him from a position he cannot easily locate. The improvised British answer did not beat that doctrine by becoming more precise. It beat it by refusing to behave like a position. A dug-in 88 said, "Here I am, if you can find me." A truck-mounted 88 said, "I was there." There is a difference. That difference buys fear. The darkest truth was that the machine was born from failure. Nobody builds something like that while a war is going according to plan. It came from burned-out convoys, lost guns, broken tanks, and repair parks full of wreckage dragged back by men who knew the next battle would ask for more than the depots could send. It came from the humiliation of watching British armor drive into German gun lines again and again. It came from the knowledge that the enemy's best idea was killing you, and copying the shape of that idea was not enough. You had to change the rhythm of it. That was what the fitters did. They took the 88's power and removed the German assumption underneath it. The assumption of patience, the assumption of prepared ground, the assumption that a heavy gun should wait like a trap. They did not make the gun less German, they made it less still. And once it was less still, it belonged to the desert. The men who crewed these machines had no illusion that they were riding inside armor. They were sitting on a lorry with a heavy gun above them and thin air around them. A near miss could tear tires apart. Machine gun fire could rake the cab. A sharp turn taken too hard could throw the whole contraption into trouble. Every firing run was a bargain with physics. The truck gave them movement. The gun gave them reach. Between those two things, they had a few minutes of power. After that, survival depended on leaving before those minutes expired. That is why the crews developed a rhythm that sounded almost reckless to anyone trained on proper artillery practice. Arrive with the engine running. Face the escape route. Fire only enough to matter. Move before certainty forms around you. Certainty was the enemy. Not just German certainty. British certainty, too. The certainty that doctrine was the same thing as wisdom. The certainty that a gun's value lived in its specifications. The certainty that the best answer to an 88 was always a cleaner, stronger, more official version of the same kind of weapon. The desert kept disproving that. A technically inferior mount could create a tactically superior moment. A gun that should have been inaccurate after recoil could still kill with its first round. A truck that made engineers wince could make tank crews hesitate, and hesitation in a fast desert fight could spread through a formation faster than any shell. This was the part the inspection reports struggled to measure. They could measure barrel length. They could measure shell weight. They could measure muzzle velocity. They could measure chassis strain and bolt shear and firing arc. They could say, correctly, that a gun mounted on a lorry was not as stable as a gun dug into the ground. But they could not measure the value of not being where the enemy thought the gun was. They could not measure the seconds stolen between the first flash and the return shot. They could not measure how much courage it cost a panzer commander to advance when a heavy gun had just fired from an impossible angle and then disappeared. War is full of machines that look decisive in a catalog. The desert exposed a harder rule. A weapon is not only what it can do. It is where it can do it, how quickly it can do it, and whether it can still be alive when the enemy tries to answer. By that standard, the improvised gun truck made sense. Not beautiful sense, not factory sense, battlefield sense. And battlefield sense is often built with poor welds, stolen parts, and men too tired to care whether an idea looks respectable. The British did not out-engineer Krupp in the repair yards behind the line. They did something more useful. They asked a question Krupp had not designed the 88 to answer. What happens when the battlefield refuses to stay still? The answer was not elegant. It was a truck bed full of sandbags. It was a brace slammed down into gravel. It was a driver already turning before the dust from the last shot had settled. It was a heavy gun firing, once from a place it had no right to be, then leaving before the desert could close its hand around it. That is why those machines mattered. Not because they were better than the original. Because they understood the country better. The German 88 had taught the desert what reach could do. The workshop gun trucks taught it what movement could do. And in a war where empty ground could become deadly, in a second that was the lesson that lasted. The perfect gun waited. The ugly one moved. And in the western desert, movement was armor.